Hello and welcome to Full Disclosure, a podcast project conceived entirely to let me spend more time than I'd ever get on the radio with interesting people. And this week's guest, James Timpson, Chief Executive of the Timpson's Group and author of The Happy Index, Lessons in Upside Down Management, isn't just interesting, James, but I hope you'll be delighted to know you're one of the people that I've been most encouraged by listeners to invite onto the podcast.
Oh, fantastic!
So one of the, quite often they say, you must get this guy on, you must. And then I heard, I think,
don't disappoint.
It's on them if you do. So we're both covered. Did I hear Profile on 4? Was there something recently?
Yeah,
I thought that was really interesting as well. And in the very happy position of people who knew you best, saying very, very nice things about you.
Yeah, they didn't manage to dig anything out. Well, I don't really. I've always been one of these people. I don't really try not to do too many things wrong.
No, and that is, of course, a huge part of your career and your book. But we will begin at the beginning. It wasn't a normal childhood by any stretch of the imagination. But I often speak to people whose childhoods weren't normal, and the abiding theme is, of course, that you don't really know that when you're a child because it's the only childhood you know.
It's normal, and it all sort of started. My mum died 8 years ago, and she's an amazing woman.
Sorry.
And she became a foster carer when I think I was about 7 or 8. And the first thing we knew about it is literally woke up in the morning and came downstairs for breakfast, and there were these two boys wearing our clothes who were having breakfast with us and had moved in. And that was Simon and Sean, and it went on from there. So we just sort of had a very chaotic, eclectic, loving household, but it was full on. And
then a constant churn. I mean, your mum fostered and cared for a lot of children more than nearly 100 children, I think, over there.
Yeah, it was. So there would be periods of calm. Sometimes you have foster children who would come in who were actually pretty straightforward and we're pretty adaptable to things, and others that were just so damaged that we had pets killed, cars smashed up. My dad's greenhouse was smashed up once. Holidays ruined, things just chaotic, lots of screaming, shouting, and other times it was you had these friends that turned up.
Did you get hacked off at all? Presumably some of your belongings got destroyed or disappeared mysteriously. Did you ever sort of ask your mum, or did you ever think, why are we doing this? None of my friends' parents are doing this.
No, it was just sort of normal. But I think my parents were very good at us knowing that we were loved and that we were their children, and we all had a responsibility to try and help these other kids who came in for a bit and then went, but we were very loved.
I mean, given what you were to do later with regard to prisoners and the company, that idea of chances, really extending the number of chances that people have. Fostering gives a chance, doesn't it? It provides a door that child would otherwise not have been able to go through. So it obviously had quite a formative impact on you.
Because you see these, we often have these tiny children, babies, toddlers running around, and they were born completely normal. They were born like anybody else, and often they've been ruined by adults or the situation they've been in, or they fell through the gaps in poverty. And I just felt that, I still do, that it's not fair, and everyone deserves a chance.
You grew up in Cheshire. What was primary school? What was your first school?
We went to quite a few different schools depending on my parents' financial situation at the time.
Because Timpson's is hugely successful now, but during the period of your dad's chief exec, it had ups and downs. It fell out of family ownership for a period as well, didn't it? We'll probably get onto that, but the idea that you lived a very gilded life is not true at this stage in your life.
I wouldn't say it was. We weren't on our uppers.
We don't have forks in the sugar bowl, right?
No. But I went to Stockport Grammar School, and I went to prep school, and then I ended up going to a boarding school. So went to lots of different schools.
Were you a good student?
Yeah, I just loved sport.
Okay.
I could do my school days every day over again. I loved it.
And what about academically?
Yeah, found it pretty straightforward.
Did you?
Yeah, I've never been good at languages. I'm still doing my Duolingo every day still. But yeah, no, I went to Durham University, and it was all pretty straightforward.
And how conscious were you growing up of a family business? Was it, because it's not an experience that most people have, and particularly not to scale when you can see the family name on the high street. It's not just Timpson, of course. I don't know when businesses like Snappy Snaps and Max Spielman and the Watch Lab got added to the empire, but were you conscious from a very early age of the business and its relationship with your family?
Yes, there were shops wherever we went that had our name above, on the fascia above the shop door, and when we went there, people were always nice to us because we were the boss's kids. I was normally with my mum or my dad, and we used to go on Saturday mornings round the shops with my dad, and we'd go in the stock room, and that was quite good fun, and go to the office. And the office was brilliant because they had this massive warehouse with these. So there was an early automated warehouse, and you could sort of sit in all these sort of cabins and be driven round, and it was good fun.
You've spoken about loving it, the smell of the leather and the glue, and serving the customers. Your father has spoken about how of you and your two siblings, you were the one who would obviously develop an affinity for it. You were the one who was obviously going to go into the business. Your brother became a Conservative MP. I'm interested in that because it's clear, having sat with you for 5 minutes, that you are an enthusiastic human being. You are enthusiastic about things. You're not in making any attempt to sort of think that it's a bit cool to be reticent or to hold back. If you love something, I sense that you're going to A, tell everybody, and B, jump in feet first. If your dad had owned a chain of mechanics, if he'd owned Quick Fit, would you have been the same about Quick Fit, or was there something specific about Timpson's, do you think, that appealed to you?
Well, I think Quick Fit is probably not a good example because it's quite similar to our business in lots of ways. In fact,
yes.
But what I loved is serving customers. Even now, so this morning I've been around shops this morning, I've been serving customers, and I still get a kick out of putting money in the till. I think it's amazing that people give us money for doing things. And I really like the people I work with. I like the competitive element of trying to hit the figures every day and every week.
You made it sound like a sport then.
Well, I love the competition.
Yeah, clearly.
But if our family business had been an IT business,
yes,
or something, it wouldn't have been for me.
Right.
I'm much better customer service. Maybe if we had a hotel business or hospitality things or something like that, it would have suited my kind of skills.
So you like dealing with the public, giving them something they want, and then measuring the rewards that you get as a consequence of doing that well.
Yeah, and I like the kind of people that want to work in our business.
What do you mean by that?
I like people who most people. I think I'm the only person who ever left school wanting to be a shoe repairer.
Yeah,
people just fall into it because they haven't found their thing yet. And if we find that right kind of person, which maybe we'll come on to in a bit, I find that really rewarding.
So from school, would you have, in your own mind, been intending to go into the family business when you left?
I'd have gone into probably the family business, or if it hadn't been the family business.
Yes.
Even at school, what I used to do is in chapel, when people were kneeling down, I could always see who had holes in their soles. So I would go and tap them up, and then they would bring their shoes to me the next day, and then I would get a taxi over to Kettering, because we still get 90% colleague discount in our business.
Right. And
so I get my colleague discount, and then I was actually earning pretty good money then.
I bet you were. It was a massive markup, and they're still getting a bargain as well. So
yeah.
everyone's a winner. I mean, I sense a sort of quite a content, happy school days. No sort of trauma or difficulty, and yet you've developed already this quite odd for a teenage boy to have this passion for the service sector, really.
Yeah, and it's just something. I love this. I get a kick from it.
When did you first do a shift in a shop?
When I was 14.
And that'd be Northwich.
Northwich, yeah.
What was that like? I mean, because it could have been a nightmare. You could have hated you might have found the public unpalatable.
Yeah. Well, what's funny? So there were two colleagues I was working with, Ian and Mark, and both colleagues still work for us. Mark actually still in the Northwich shop, and Ian works in one of our factories on the Wirral. And it was just, I used to do the Saturdays, and in those days shoe repairs was much busier than it is now.
Sure.
So it was basically a shoe repair business, and now if I was to do the same day again, it would be a key cutting and watch repair business. But it's still the same smell and feel and noise and things.
And it lived up to all of your dreams and expectations.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I've just sort of enjoyed it.
And would you even then have been conscious of the fact that one day all this would be yours? Were you thinking about things you might change, or things that did you talk to your dad about direction and strategy and energy, or were you just too busy getting stuck in on the shop
all the time, fascinated by business?
Yeah.
And my dad's amazing. He's brilliant, and we've done this together for the last 30 years. And I must have been a bit of a strange child in some ways, because the highlight of my day was reading the business pages of the newspapers. I'd read the sport eventually, but
you saw it as a game. I've mentioned that you make it sound like sport, but you see it as, if I learn this and do that and get good at that, and if I work out here and flex these muscles, I'll be able to do. That's the impression I'm getting. It's
quite logical.
Yes,
it is. If you want to run a really successful 5-star hotel, there are certain things that you need to do. So just do them.
And yet your ethos as you would establish when you became CEO and before, and as you've written about in the book, your ethos is very much at odds with what most companies would, most CEOs would do, and most business people believe. So while you say it's obvious or logical, it's also visionary and original.
So I think there are two parts to it. The first proper job I had after leaving university, I was a door-to-door sales rep for a laundry company in Gateshead.
Gosh.
And did Sunderland and Gateshead and around there. And the bosses at the time weren't great bosses. And the team on the factory floor, people putting the clothes in the machines and driving the trucks, they were brilliant and they knew the business. And they helped me get my sales far more. In fact, the bosses were the sales prevention team, really. And it had a big impact on me because I didn't feel that the people on the front line were treated with respect at all. They weren't treated as an equal, and they should have been, because they really knew that business. And that was a bit of a turning point for me. I sort of resented the leadership style that was there. Right. I felt very uncomfortable with it. So then when I joined the business, I spent a lot of time finding companies that I'd heard about or read about that ran it in the way that I think I wanted it to be run. So I just used to phone them up, write letters, and just watch them for a day or a week. And a lot of them said yes. In fact, most of them said yes. And I was just like a sponge, soaking up ideas, writing things down, and just copying it and translating it from how QuickFit. In fact, I spent a day with Tom Farmer when he was running QuickFit. Yeah. And he explained to me exactly how he did his management structure, how he incentivized the mechanics, and how, I remember, maybe it's the same now, as soon as a car comes in, they want to get it on the ramp. Right. So that was the thing, just get it on the ramp. Southwest Airlines was we're only making money when the wheels are up. And all these you just sort of pick all these things up, and it ends up being an ingredient.
So, I mean, in a nutshell, your attitude is that a happy, fulfilled workforce will be more productive. So it's easy to portray you as some sort of visionary altruist, but there's a capitalist rationale to the way you approach, a very capitalist rationale to the way you approach things as well.
I'm very commercial.
Yes.
And what I've learned is the way to make the most amount of money is to have people who work in the business who are happy, motivated, and treated as an equal. And if you don't have those things, then you are reducing the potential of the business.
But that's so contrary to what so many business people believe, isn't it? I mean, you need to. I've read before that if you want rich people to work harder, you've got to give them more, and if you want poor people to work harder, you've got to give them less. So that's completely at odds with your discoveries, not just your credo.
And the traditional business model is the directors decide what the strategy is.
Yeah.
They tell the senior management, you need to come up with a plan, and the people who actually serve customers and put money in the till are just told what to do. But actually, turn it the other way around, and you'll have a far more effective organisation.
And your dad was completely on board with this from the start,
yes,
yeah,
very much.
Was it something you brought to him?
Yeah, because my dad never ran the shoe repair chain. He ran the shoe shops, and
yes.
And we sort of had professional management in. Quite old school, quite military, ex-military people.
Like Are You Being So, like Captain Peacock.
Yeah.
And that was the retail. I was in retail before I got into the media, so I know a lot about that world. And it was, oddly, that was a destination career for people who'd come out of the military, wasn't it?
And so it's very much, do as you're told.
Yes.
We'll come in, as long as the shop is immaculately clean.
Yes. That's
the most important thing. Whereas for us, it's, do we have amazing colleagues working there? Are they happy? And then if we get all that right, and then the shop's clean, that's okay.
So you realised pretty quickly that if you had, when you went into branches to work from the bottom up, that the more freedom you had, the more money you could make. I just want to pick up on, it's not just the money. You obviously derive enormous satisfaction on a psychological or an emotional level from what you've described. What's the percentage there? I mean, how much of it would you be doing anyway, even if it didn't have a massive impact on profitability? Having happy staff, helping people. I think there's £1 million a year you put aside for supporting your workforce. Stories which I've heard you speak about in interviews about one fella needed some teeth because he couldn't smile.
We do a lot of teeth.
We do a lot because if they've had that kind of life, then teeth are one of the things that don't get looked after. So you must get enormous pleasure from that, regardless of what impact that fella's new teeth are going to have on your bottom line in whatever job it is. So it's not just about.
So today I went to probably done 5-6 shop visits today.
Where did you go?
I've been to, where did we start off? We started at Old Kent Road.
Okay.
And then we've done a bit in the city, done Canary Wharf.
Do they know you're coming?
No.
But do they all know you now? Does everyone?
Yeah.
Because you've been to every shop regularly.
Yeah.
So okay. So what happens when
so
you turn
sometimes
up?
you may meet a new colleague you haven't met before.
Yeah, sure.
But by the end of the day, the jungle drums have gone, so everyone knows you're around,
Right,
but they don't
okay,
know where you're
yes,
going.
Okay.
So basically, I walk in, say hello. If there's customers need serving, I'll help serve the customers, do my best. I'll have a look at the figures. So we have everyone writes down the figures every day, how much they've taken. It's at the back of the shop, and have a quick look around. But then it's all about the conversation. How happy are you? What do we need to fix? I use a phrase which is, if you had a magic wand, what can we do to help you make the shop better? And what I'm really interested in is just the body language I get from them.
Okay.
And you can tell whether they are 10 out of 10 happy or not. And if they're not, I guarantee the figures won't be as good, because so much of our business is about selling, and you've got to be on the front foot. Otherwise, you will take 50% less
And
money.
we're back on the doorstep in Gateshead now, where you felt you could do a much better job of selling directly to the customer if you felt supported and looked after in a way that you didn't from management.
Yeah, and so I'll often get a list of 2 or 3 things that they would like fixing. There may be a problem, they wanted some special piece of stock,
Right,
or
yes.
This machine hasn't been working for 4 weeks and no one sorted it out, that kind of thing. So it's my job to sort those out, but also to say thank you, because so many people work really, really hard and no one ever says thank you to them.
There'll be a lot of people listening to this who have had the polar opposite experience. I obviously need to go back nearly 30 years from when I was in retail, and I had both experiences. And when I worked in River Island, it was awful. And I had a manager who, would have you folding jumpers for absolutely no reason. And in fact, he would tell you, if there was not a lot going on, to unfold the jumpers that you'd folded yesterday and then fold them up again. And so if you'd come in and ask me how happy I was, I'd have slapped you. I was absolutely miserable.
And then you left.
Well, yeah. I mean, I wasn't necessarily going to stay there anyway, but if I'd had to, and we're back to choices and doors, I'd have been miserable when I got home. I'd have been angry probably, and also I'd have felt trapped. And then when I worked at Aquascutum on Regent Street, it was a lot more like you described. Like the manager knew that if someone walked in who looked like they were about to drop $5,000 on cashmere coats, then you could stay with them for an hour. You could go to their hotel to deliver. You could offer to bring them back to their hotel. That's really what you're talking about, I think, isn't it? And it is quite self-evident, and yet it's still so rare. So not the companies that you visited and inspired as well, because that's cut both ways now, hasn't it? You've paid it forward. So companies like Greggs have started adopting some of the policies that you've employed, to the point where I think you turned up at a prison recently and they'd already nabbed all the good potential recruits.
Yeah, we love Greggs.
But how do you make sense of, or what do you feel when you look at a company that still treats their staff in the way that the company in the Northeast treated its door-to-door salesmen?
Well, if I was someone who bought and sold shares in companies, which I'm not.
Yeah. Why not? Why aren't you?
I'm not really money orientated like that.
Okay. Because that's the only kick in it, is watching the bottom line go up. You don't get the satisfaction of a happy customer.
Yeah, I'm not a gambler or anything like that.
Okay.
But
you'd probably be good at it.
But you can spot from the experience as a customer, you could judge whether you should buy shares in a company or sell them.
You could.
So let me give you an example. We've just been to Corfu for 5 days, my wife and I. The service at Jet2 from start to finish was brilliant. Fantastic. Everyone seemed happy, on the front foot, high standards. You could tell this is a business doing well. So if I was going to buy shares, I can't say this on this.
Of course you can.
But I'd say that is how you can work out how a business is doing. And let's use the example of Greggs. Greggs is a great business.
It's very true.
It's consistent. You know what's going to happen there.
Yes.
And it just makes you feel good. And
shout out to the bloke in the Chiswick High Road branch who always puts a smile on my face when I pop in to see them. But you're not answering my question about the companies that aren't like that. How do you, I mean, if what you describe is so straightforward and so logical, why do so many people listening to this have the opposite experience at work still?
Companies often have a short-term culture. They're often very controlled by finance. When a business does poorly, when every business will have a bad run, when things are difficult, finance becomes far more controlling, and they decide what happens. And the first thing that they do is cut costs, and they don't take out the expensive people. They take out people on the front line, and that really impacts the other people on the front line. And they start taking out the things that actually make a business special. So, we're a family business. We hopefully be a family business for another 5 generations. But if we wanted to sell the business next month, I could strip out quite a lot of money, millions of pounds worth of costs. But I believe that money that we do spend, buying someone a new set of teeth, actually long term makes far more money than the short term extra cost that it entails.
So, in a sense, the more modern practice of prioritising, even if business is going well, if you're trying to maximise dividends and payouts for shareholders, you're going to go down the same path that you've just described, because in the course of 5 years you might be able to take a ton of money out of the business, but the business that's left 5 years later is a shadow of what it would have been otherwise. But the shareholders and the investors have walked away happy.
Exactly. And
so being a family business becomes absolutely essential to your philosophy.
Makes a big difference. So if we have a bad run, we'll go and buy more holiday homes.
Yeah.
Because I want our colleagues to feel happier and even more engaged and to look after people, because I know that's going to help us in the long run make more money.
How many holiday homes have you got?
19.
Tell me about when you first had that idea.
Well, I nicked it.
Did you?
So Richard Sound, so Julian Rich is a friend of mine. He has an amazing business. And he wrote this book called The Richer Way, which for me was like a light bulb moment. Someone else gets it. This business is, and there were so many things that I just looked up to him for many years and copied. I spent time at his house. I went on all of his training courses, and I felt I knew the business pretty well. And one of the things they had was 5 or 6 holiday homes. So we ended up buying one very near their one in Spain.
Right.
And this was the start of, will it work? And it works. Colleagues who go there, they don't leave. They'll help us when they don't. But they probably don't want to come into work one day. They'll make that extra effort to do so. So that's how the holiday home started. And in fact, another idea that Julian had didn't work for us. He had I don't think they do it anymore, but they used to have a Rolls Royce that the colleague of the month could have and do whatever they want with. So, and this was with this was when I first started out properly in the business. So I came up with this idea. I found one on Auto Trader for £10,000, and had it all. I was really excited about it. And my finance director at the time, on the Monday morning, came up with all the reasons why it wouldn't work. But basically he was saying he didn't think that the guys from the warehouse should be driving a Rolls Royce, whereas I think they should.
Not that they wouldn't enjoy it, but they shouldn't be behind the wheel of one. Okay.
How can you trust them?
Yeah.
So these are the most important people in the business. We trust them with everything. So we had a sort of change in personnel. I never got more Rolls Royce, but the culture was starting to build.
I don't think you would be comfortable naming names, and so I won't either. But when I think of, you have mentioned The Apprentice actually as being almost the antithesis of what you believe.
I think it's awful.
So when you find yourself in the company of other business owners or chief executives who practice that sort of more 1980s approach, that which is typified by The Apprentice on both sides of the Atlantic. What goes on there? Do these people think you're weird? Do you threaten them? Do you feel conscious when you're in their company of you just said that you think it's awful there with quite some venom in your voice. Would that come across if you were sitting around a...
Well, I'd be polite.
Yes, of course you would.
But I think when people look at our business, they think, it must be pretty straightforward. You just you're just giving people these things and buying this and doing this, but they don't understand it's actually a very complex culture. Culture takes years to develop, and actually a lot of chief execs aren't around long enough to really develop a culture of complexity that works. They're just in there to get the job done, get the share price up, and move on to a better job. So that's where and another issue is when people talk about our prison stuff and they go, "Oh, it's a wonderful idea. We should do that." Can I put my HR team in touch with your HR team?
My people, your people.
Yeah, it's never going to happen.
Sure.
And I'll give you another one as well while I'm on my little rant. Because we live up in Cheshire and our office is in Manchester, but we're dealing with the whole country and over in Ireland as well. So many people, I know we're in London now, so many people say, "Oh, when you're next in London,
right,
come and see me and you can tell me all about it." So I say, well, that's great, but when you're in Manchester, come and see. And it's amazing how few will actually make the effort to come and
because they don't care that much.
They don't care that much.
They want you to make it easy for them. I just want to go back briefly to your childhood and the fact that your mum and dad adopted 2 of the children that were fostered. I'm adopted. So I find that fascinating, and actually I've met your brother Edward when we were both doing some work for an adoption organisation here, Quorum. Was that different for you as the biological child? Was it different for you from the fosterings when these 2 brothers became permanent? Ollie and Henry became permanent parts of your family.
Yeah. So, but there's quite a big age gap.
Right.
So Ollie is 47. And Henry is 31.
Oh, okay.
So when Henry arrived on the scene, I was sort of 17, 18, I think, something like that. So even though, very much part of the family, it wasn't really on my watch. Whereas Ollie, Ollie's now, married, he's got 4 kids, and, but he didn't find life straightforward. But it was different, but it wasn't different.
Yes.
Because we still had foster children turning up all the time, and it wasn't just foster children. It was anybody who was having a difficult time, or anybody whose kids, people who were getting divorced, their kids, all these people just came to sort of live with us all the time, really.
How did your mum and dad decide which ones to adopt? Do you know?
I think my mum wanted more kids, but she had a hysterectomy, so she couldn't. And the first 2 foster children I spoke about, Simon and Sean, in those days, when you were a foster parent, you could only have them for 6 months, and then they would go back. And she just couldn't she found it very, very difficult. So I think there was this big part of her that she just wanted to help these kids. And when Ollie turned up, I think because he had a very difficult childhood. His name was actually Roy when he came to live with us. And my mum and dad changed his name. And I think one of the foster parents, one of the social workers said, good luck with this lad.
Right.
He's been through children's homes and everything. He's finding, if he can settle with you, you'll be doing well. So she saw that as a real challenge, and that's when Ollie joined the family. So he was a foster child for about 4 or 5 months, and then they started the process of adoption.
Did your mum see a line going back to what she did in what you do? Did she see that the lessons you'd learned from her? Was it a kind of a pride in the things you'd taken forward from this notion of care and chances, giving people chances?
Yeah, definitely. In fact, when she was poorly, she was, a couple of years before she died, she started to get poorly with cancer, and so I thought, well, on her birthday, what does a parent want on their birthday? They want time. So on her birthday, last sort of probably 4 or 5 years before she died, it was always on her birthday. That was it. I'd have the whole day with her, and I decided to take her one day into a prison. Because she'd been to like a women's prison to take the babies she was fostering, but never been into it. So I took her into Young Offenders Institute in Wigan. And the problem was she wanted to bring them all home. She loved it. And it was fascinating.
You mentioned that. You glossed over it again because it was normal in your childhood. When your mum went to visit women's prisons, she was taking babies to visit their mothers. And you would be just sitting outside most of us sometimes were left in a pub car park with a packet of crisps and a bottle of Vimto, but you were outside prisons waiting for your mum to finish her visits. And again, I suspect you didn't really have any concept of that being completely out of the ordinary because that was the only family life you knew.
That was normal.
So when you left Durham, you knew that you were going to end up at Timpson's group, but you obviously wanted to do other jobs. You weren't just a door-to-door salesman. I think you had a stint on the Radio 1 roadshow.
Yeah, I was a roadie.
I
was also in a Dalek.
Were you really? Where?
So Steve Wright, the late Steve Wright, used to have this thing, the Daleks. You remember the Daleks?
Yes, of course.
So on the roadshow, they had 2 Daleks that were made, but you had to. So I was in one of them. But the problem is, health and safety in those days wasn't very good. You had to make sure you didn't fall off.
Yes, exactly. How did you pick these jobs? I mean, because I could see why being a door-to-door salesman would be part of your sort of self-prescribed apprenticeship. But was the Radio 1 stuff just for a bit of fun?
I always loved radio, and one of my mum's friends worked for the BBC and said they were looking for people to do basically just carry things around and pick people up and drop them off. And I said, fine, I'd love to do it. You don't need to pay me. It sounds like an amazing job.
I have an image then of you from about the age of 11, whether consciously or not, collecting experiences that you would then mould like a potter into things that you would deploy when you went at the age of 25 to work for the family business. You must have been like a dynamo. I mean, do you think you may have been a bit much for some of your colleagues when you arrived? Was there a sense of you wanting to do everything yesterday, or were you aware of the long game then in the way that you are now?
You're completely right. They used to call me the whirlwind in the office. I remember once in the days of fax machines, I had a colleague called Rod, and we used to do the shop fitting together, and he's retired a number of years ago. He's brilliant, Rod. And I kept sending him through, what about this? This shop needs this. And then I got a fax back eventually saying, don't send me any more faxes.
Because he just hadn't got the bandwidth. We've got to finish this before we can start on that.
Yeah.
Where did you learn? Maybe you never did, but did you learn patience at any point?
Not really.
No.
I think as you get older, you get better because you've sort of seen things before and you sort of know how things are going to pan out. And I think also, we've been through, like all businesses, a few difficult patches, especially with COVID. And that was a test. As a business leader, that was a test I'll hopefully never have again. But I think if I hadn't have had all the experiences I'd had in the past, I wouldn't have been able to handle it as well as we did.
Yes. What did you prioritise? Did you go? I mean, because the maddest thing about it, from your point of view, would have been not knowing how long it was going to last for. I imagine. So, some of the decisions that you might have made, thinking it could last for a year, and then it might have lasted for a month, and vice versa. So, how did you prioritise things? What did you put at the top of your list of things that mattered?
Well, I had it in my head it would last about 4 or 5 weeks. Okay. So I said to all the colleagues, I'll pay you 100% all the way through, however long this takes. But we've all got to go home. And then it was about communication, because lots of our colleagues were on their own and they needed to feel this sort of sense of belonging.
Yes.
And with suppliers, and I wrote to all the landlords to say we're going to pay our rent in full and all this sort of stuff. So it started off by sort of loads of communication, and then it just went on and on where you couldn't do anything. The business was in hibernation. And I actually got quite angry because I had these shops ready to go, these colleagues at home, and then all the supermarkets, certain shops were allowed to open, but we weren't. And it was just so frustrating because I just thought the business was done. I actually once,
did you really?
I thought we were done, because we're a high margin service business that you can't do online.
Yeah.
And so we were losing over £1 million a week. Yeah. And it kept going on and on and on. And I remember one day leaving my office. There's only about 4 of us in the office every day, and taking a photo, thinking that's it. I probably won't be coming back again.
Seriously? Who did you tell?
Well, my wonderful wife, Rasheen.
You did? And
my dad saying, we're here.
What did your dad say?
Let's speak to the bank. Let's see if we can borrow some money. Paresh, our finance director, is brilliant. So we've never had debt for years and years. We haven't had any debt in the business. So going to talk to a bank about taking on debt is not a nice thing to do. But it's just this, we just didn't know what was going to happen, because when you reopen, it doesn't go back up to 100% straight away.
No, of course it doesn't. But also a lot of you were spending money you didn't need to spend during COVID. You were topping up.
I didn't have to spend it, but I felt I needed to spend it.
So the difference between have and need is that the company you ran needed to spend that money.
Yeah, because
to be the company you ran. Yeah,
because our values are everyone's treated equally, and you look after everybody in the business as part of the family. So if that costs you more, that's how you do it, because you can't just keep changing your plan to suit yourself.
And was there a moment before the shops reopened when you thought we're actually going to be okay, or were you on tenterhooks until the shops reopened and you saw what came across the tills?
There were 2 things that happened. One is the government were actually very generous. I thought on the grant, we got grants for the shops that were closed, and they, we had rates holidays and things. And when that money started to come in, it came in really fast. And then the furlough scheme kicked in, and we could actually use the furlough scheme to our advantage, because it helped. People could do half a day, so we'd open shops for just half a day, and so we started to, even though there were 112 changes to the furlough scheme in the period, but we sort of learnt our way around it. And then just when some shops started opening, that was like, okay, I know it's not good, but we can deal with this.
And you are rolling again now.
Yeah, but I would say now it's completely back to normal, even when you're comparing to last year's figures.
Do you do anything differently now as a consequence of those experiences, or are you back to the business that you would have been before anyone knew what a coronavirus was?
I would say the main thing we do differently is we've got a lower overhead. So because we were losing so much money, we made redundancies.
Yeah. How's that? How are you at that?
Horrendous.
Did you hate it?
Hate it.
Did you get tension in your tummy? Do you feel sick before you have to do it?
I mean, yes, because we're dealing with people,
yeah,
and it's not their fault that we made these decisions. But we thought, well, if we don't make these redundancies, then we're going to go down even quicker. So at least we just keep it going a bit longer. And what I learned is that we had lots of wonderful people. We didn't actually need them all. So when we've come back from COVID, we didn't replace them all,
right? And
we've managed to cope quite well. So from a cost-based perspective, we're running the business on a lower cost base, and I sort of kick myself in some ways to say, why did we take on all these extra people when maybe we didn't need them?
The Happy Index has been a bestseller. All the money goes to the Prison Reform Trust, doesn't it? Which again is something you didn't need to do, but I think anyone who's listened this far into the podcast will be supremely unsurprised that you felt that you did actually need to do that. And we haven't got onto your relationship with prisons yet, but tell me what upside down management is.
So it was a phrase my dad invented after lots of conversations between the two of us around this point on everyone's equal.
Because this is crucial to how you handled the pandemic, isn't it? Absolutely intrinsic.
Completely. So the way our business works is the colleagues who serve customers and put money in the till on the front line are the kings and queens of the business. Everyone else's job is to help them, not to tell them what to do, not to get in the way. And it's as simple as that. That's how it works.
I love this. And so it's a pyramid, isn't it? Really. The normal pyramid, the people you've just described are the foot soldiers at best. They're the kind of the flotsam and jetsam. The last person that you think about is the one who's actually customer facing and putting the money in the till. And the people at the top are the panjandrums and so you turn that on its head and you get the results that you get. Which means you couldn't do the pandemic any differently, could you? Because you would then have been recasting them as the junior members of the team or the inferior contributors to the company.
And so one of any organisation's problems is when people get paid more and take on more responsibility, they sort of want to tell people what to do because not everyone does what they're meant to do. So they want to then put loads of rules and processes in place so people sort of comply. Doesn't work for us.
But this was your first experience in a Timpson shop, I think, wasn't it? This is when you said you could improve the take by 50% if you would just be allowed to do whatever you wanted to do.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
So if you were to think about your days working at River Island, if you were allowed to
still do often, James.
to do whatever you wanted, you'd have served customers in the way you felt was right, and you'd have done deals, and I'll go down the stock room and I'll do... Exactly. But there were things you were just told what to do.
Yes.
So that was...
Flipping jumpers,
folding a lot of jumpers, and it was actually preventing. There was a sales prevention team, really.
Yes.
So our view is you find the right people, train them in what to do, and let them get on with it. So then they are completely responsible for the performance of their shop. Whereas if you are reliant on lots of other people at head office or people telling you what to do, you are not completely responsible.
So that's lesson one: assemble a high-performing super team, and you never have to worry. You do worry.
All the time.
Yeah, but not in that way. You don't worry about whether or not the people down there are happy, and whether, because I mean the two go hand in hand, upside down management and the Happy Index, inevitably in a way, because if you don't have the upside down management, you don't care whether they're happy or not.
No.
Do you?
No. I mean, one of our issues is around when we buy another business. So we bought lots of businesses over the years, and you inherit this culture, which is different, and it takes 7 years, 5 years for that culture to feel the same as our Timpson culture.
Of course it does.
And that is the thing I worry about the most, is how you take these businesses, some small, some big businesses, but even tiny businesses, it takes a long time for people to really trust this culture. And it's not just about giving everyone holidays and buying people new teeth.
And that's what other CEOs don't realise, is that they think it is gimmicky, and therefore, well, we'll just copy the gimmicks and we'll get the same results. But it's philosophy, this. It goes much
complex.
deeper. Yes, it is complex, which is why it merits an entire book and more. Some of the lessons are quite self-explanatory, but I mean, if you build it, they will come is one of my all-time favourite phrases, as well as but for slightly different reasons as a radio phone-in host. But building a great company culture, and then to get ahead, you've got to get about. That surely applies more to you than it does to the average employee.
Yeah, I think the best ideas don't come from the boardroom. The best ideas come from the people on the front line. So you've got to get out and about. And so let me give you an example. Car keys. So we're really into car keys. We do lots of car keys, but it's quite a complex area. If we want to take more money on car keys, I might as well find 6 colleagues who love car keys, get them in a room for the day and say, right, what are all the things we need to do to help you take more money on car keys? And they'll give you a list of 5 or 6 things, maybe a new piece of kit or something else. And then you just get it for them. And then they will normally take more money because they know far more about it than I do.
Do they get anything? If someone comes up with an amazing idea, do they see a piece of the action?
Yeah, loads of awards and prizes and thank yous and yeah.
So now we come to the bit that in many ways people may know more about you as a consequence of this than anything else, which is when you visited Thorncross, I think, near Warrington in 2002. And met a young man named Matt, which in a way changed everything for your company and for you personally, because it's turned you into a businessman with a very different sort of profile than you would have had, even if you were still doing the Happy Index and the Upside Down management. What were you doing there in 2002 to start with?
I was just invited on a local employers thing. They had a bit of a push to give people jobs. I think they used to have a national rail workshop there where people, and it had closed, so they needed to get some local businesses in.
So you met Matt.
Yeah, he was my tour guide.
And at some point during that tour, you thought, I'd quite like to hire this lad when he gets out.
Yeah, because he was telling me his story, that he just finished his A-levels and got into trouble and he couldn't go to university and didn't know what to do. But I thought it was brilliant. So I just said, when you're out, if you can't find anything, give me a ring and I'll sort something out.
And he did.
And he's still with us today.
And how did that then morph into a more formal scheme, a more formal practice really for the entire company?
Well, I kept my head down, so I thought, well, if I can get, we were a growing business, so I needed more people. So, right, I've got Matthew. How can I get some more Matthews? So basically, every other Friday, I used to go to the prisons in the Northwest, walk in the wings with the governors, looking for sparky people and sitting in their cells and talking to them.
And the governors would be delighted to help you and to see you do this. Yeah. And at the time, you were the only person doing it. So other people must have thought you were mad.
Yeah. I mean, we're a business that cuts keys, and I'm employing people who've committed burglary and that sort of stuff. I just wanted to recruit some really good people and see how it went. And I made some mistakes. I recruited people I shouldn't have done.
Sure. And it's all you at this point. It's all on you. Is it still all on you?
No, I've got a team. I've got a amazing colleague called Darren who does a lot of it with me. And so I've got about 15 to 20 colleagues, and then I got all my area managers together as part of their sort of, our annual get together. And I said, I've got a confession to make.
Yeah.
Put the photos up of these colleagues and said, they've all got something in common. They've all been to prison. I recruited them from prison. And the reaction was, these people are brilliant, go and get me some more. And also, I think some of it was that a number of them, when they were younger, got into trouble and got a criminal record, and they didn't want, they basically lied in their application form. So they felt a lot better about it as well. And then I opened up a training academy in Liverpool prison, in Walton jail. And that was really when it started to motor. And then we started doing it all over the UK, and it's sort of, now it's a really normal part of our business.
What do you see then if we go right back to when you're walking the wing with the governor, and and I know that you've said that you made some mistakes, it would have been impossible not to, but what would you see that made you go yes as opposed to no?
Body language.
Okay.
Sparkiness. A readiness to engage. Because sometimes you go into prisons, and especially in men's prisons, a lot of people won't look you in the eye. They think, if I'm wearing a tie and a jacket, they think I'm a lawyer or something like that. I'm looking for people who are ready. They've got to that stage in life where they're fed up of the chaos that they're creating for them and their families. And then when you start talking to them, I'm interested in if they've got a stable relationship, if they've got parents who will have them back. Because those are all the things you need as well as a job.
It's a shame in a way, that, isn't it? Because in a sense they've already got some advantages that some of their cellmates and fellow prisoners won't have. And as a consequence of that, they get the extra advantage of you then sorting them out with a job. But they wouldn't be able to do the job if they didn't have the functional background in a way. So you've got to be a little, pragmatic about it. You're not John the Baptist marching into these.
Unconventional.
Yes.
I want really good people who are going to take lots of money and serve customers well.
Yes.
And also, we don't recruit sex offenders. We don't, I worked out, we don't want people who still got drug and alcohol problems.
Sure.
We don't want people who are too young and they're not ready to give up their criminal journey. And there are some people that don't actually want to work or can't work, and that's what the state's for.
Yeah.
But I would very happily show you so many of my colleagues who've joined from prison who've achieved way more than anybody else you or I know in life, from where they started.
In terms of the length of the journey, the distance covered.
Yeah, and the damage that they have had been put on them.
Well, we're back to fostering in a way, aren't we? And you know that they couldn't have done that if it wasn't for what you've done at Timpson's. I mean, there is no other place in which that journey could have been started, let alone continued or completed, if you hadn't done this thing that you started doing in 2002.
Yeah, I mean, there was no one else doing it in those days, really.
How kind to yourself are you, James? How often do you allow yourself to feel pretty bloody special about some of this stuff?
I'm really proud of the prison stuff. I mean, business for me is like a big game.
Sure.
It's like a big game of chess.
That became clear within 5 minutes of sitting down. I got that. But this is different.
Yeah. For me, it's emotional.
It's for your mum, isn't it?
Yeah, and I go, well, yeah, it is, and and it's for the people that I meet, and there's nothing more satisfying in my job, not by looking how much money we made last week, but by seeing someone who's been on their arse. You met them in prison, and they're we have a number of our area managers. It's a big job in our business, who are people we first met in prison, and there they are. They're earning big money. They're leading 100 people, and good on them.
I presume these people would take a bullet for you. I mean, if we ever found ourselves in a Mad Max type scenario in this country, I'm coming to you, because you're going to have a phalanx of people who are utterly committed to you, and that, of course, as you will now say to me, but that translates immediately into commercial results as well. Because it's not just you, is it? It's Timpson's. That's what saved them.
And there are a lot of people who haven't had much kindness shown to them in life, and if you can show kindness and trust them, and because a lot of people recruit from prison, it's not even when they join us, they have a few wobbles, and so support them through that, and then if you can get them through the first 18 months, they become incredibly settled and loyal. And you're right. I mean, partly because you've only got a criminal record, it's harder to, there are not as many people who'll take you on. But that sense of loyalty that we've given them that second chance, and they stay.
So was it a very simple decision when you were invited to become chair of the Prison Reform Trust? There's just various charities and support groups already. Was that something that just speaks to a different part of you from the bottom lines of the business?
Prison Reform Trust is a wonderful charity, and what I'm interested in is why. When I go to the prisons, some are fantastic and open doors and really help the men and women in there transform their lives. It's a real culture of helping people. And you go to others, it's chaotic, it's badly run, it's and then you double that with the policies that come through from Westminster, and you are dealing
one
with
a week, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you are dealing with the most complex people in the country in a system that is the most complex, and I find that really interesting.
Of course. And what does success look like in that space? What do you aim to achieve? How do you know whether or not your contribution has been worthwhile?
Well, in some ways I've failed, because the prison population has kept going up, and it will keep going up, because we're sentencing people to much longer sentences, even though there's no evidence anywhere in the world that it reduces crime.
It makes nice headlines, doesn't it?
Yeah. So success, I think, for me, is seeing other employers taking people on from prison, and the fact that actually now, if you don't take people on from prison, you're not really a diverse employer. So it's become quite normal, and I feel I've given people the cover to have a go. And
the trust as well that you set up in your mum's memory in 2017. I mean, the longer this conversation goes on, the more amazing it is that you've got time to visit any shops. You've got so many plates spinning, but that is how you like things.
Yeah, and I love working, and I work hard, and I travel around and get stuck in. But on the prison stuff, it becomes it's fascinating, and it's the more you peel the layers back, the more interesting it becomes.
What do you like as a customer? You've mentioned Jet2, but when you walk into a shop, can you tell pretty quickly? You mentioned walking in here, actually, and we've got a lovely culture at Global, and you picked up on that pretty much before you were through.
Very warm here.
It is. It's a really lovely place to work, and that's not a coincidence, as you would appreciate more than anyone. It comes down from And again, it's a family business actually, so people have the freedom to control and to play long games. But when you walk into, if I were to suggest that at the moment John Lewis is on the back foot rather than the front foot, can you tell why when you walk into a branch of John Lewis?
It doesn't feel like it used to feel.
It doesn't, does it?
And it's cultural, and it's about standards. And I hope they get there, the culture. But
because it was the mothership in many ways of a lot of the stuff you believe in, wasn't it? The sharing with the partners rather than the employees. I mean, for a long time, when I started on the radio 20 years ago, and I'd try and explain to listeners what I thought businesses should be like, in many ways, John Lewis was the only one I could point to back then. Mm-hmm. And yet now, as you say, when you walk in there, something doesn't feel quite right.
There used to be such a focus on service and the fact that all partners were equal, and the fact that they really invest in their ranges, and they always had they never ran out of stock, and then as business became tougher, finance took over, as I said before, and it's been tougher for them.
So I'm always intrigued by. I mean, when the business pages, which you were reading at 4, when the business pages have made a big song and dance about a new appointment, and there's a little bit of me that's sort of, well, how much difference can a chief executive really make? But actually, speaking to you today and reading some of your book, it's not a mystery how much difference a chief executive can really make, is it? I mean, A, that's why they get paid the big bucks. B, that's why they're often household names. And C, that's why appointing the right person is an existential challenge to a company at the moment. If they will, as you thought you might during COVID, they could go under if they don't get it right. So that's, for most businesses, that's not upside down managed. So that's a challenge to the theory of upside down management. You've got to have, whichever way round the pyramid is, you've got to have the right person at the pinnacle of the pyramid, haven't you?
And you're completely right. What amazes me is that even if huge organisations, it comes down to one person.
Yeah,
they've got to get it right. So if you take the analogy of football clubs, they are so dependent on the manager who they appoint more than any other role in that football club, and that has huge impacts in how they perform, the value of the club, and the same goes for business. I mean, I think retail is one of those where a chief executive can have quite an immediate impact on the culture, and it's quite interesting. In a couple of weeks' time, I'm going to meet the chief exec of Morrison's. We've got a number of concessions in Morrison's, and I've heard some really interesting things about how he's driving change and improving standards, and so I'll be really interested to feel and how
whether you can sense it.
Yeah,
in him, and then in the shop. So it would start with the top person, and then you'd feel the ethos, the philosophy, spread into the shop. Which brings us back to the book. Why did you want to write it, and who? Because who is it aimed at? Who did you have in mind when you were writing it, and why did you want to write it?
Well, basically what happened is I met a guy who was the business editor of the Sunday Times at a lunch with a friend, and over a bottle or two of wine, I said that I would write one column for him 1 week, and then I ended up doing it every week for a year. And then Ollie Shire, he'd written some books, and his agent had said, "Oh, I think I can get this into a book." And I said, "Well, I'm running a business. I don't really know how to do these things. So, but if someone wants to pay a lot of money that goes to Prison Reform Trust, then I'll have to do it."
Right.
So they did. And then the book for me, so I've been asked quite a lot around how do you run the business,
yes.
and my dad's written some books as well. And
I love the fact they're in the shops, aren't they?
Yeah.
Quite often they stand out a bit, James, don't they?
Yeah.
It's not the first thing you expect to see.
No, when you walk into a shoe repair shop,
it's your dad's oeuvre.
We get through a lot of them actually. We sort of give them away, and I just thought it'd be really useful for our colleagues as part of our sort of culture, so they can understand why we do things. And also, I just wish more businesses would trust their fantastic people who don't really have a voice, because these people are amazing, and it really helps you run your business better. So it helps being a private business that I'm not going to get fired. Well, I wouldn't have thought so. It'd be quite difficult conversation at the dinner table.
At Christmas.
Yeah. But yeah, I hope it helps.
Well, speaking of that, not of you getting fired, but of gauges of success. How do you? I mean, the obvious answer to this question is you compare this year's figures to last year's figures, but that's when you're buying new companies and you have like unforeseeable lumps in the road like COVID. That's not completely binary, is it? You could increase this year's take exponentially by doing some of the things that we've talked about previously, by making the company less attractive moving forward, but by delivering more money this year. So it can't just be that, the bottom line, because you could boost the bottom line for this year and next year enormously. So what do you look to? What's a good year for you compared to a bad year beyond the bottom line? Almost because it's going to be involved.
What I'm interested in is we have 17 different businesses, some tiny, some big ones.
What's the tiniest?
We've got the 9 barber shops.
Have you?
Yeah, run by Byron, who's brilliant. Every business needs to have a belief that it can grow.
Yeah.
That you want to open more shops. And I always remember my dad said years ago, the reason why he sold the shoe shops is he couldn't justify opening a new one. And that's always stood with me. Yeah. And we always need to justify whether we can keep growing. So that's one of the things we look at. And then, as the title of the book, we look how happy our colleagues are. That's, in fact, the happy index actually went out last week, so we're starting to get all the replies back in. And that's, to us, it's a big deal, because if people are happy and you're making decent money, everything's okay. I wouldn't want people to be unhappy and to be making good money, because that it's going to go wrong. And
that idea that a business, that there is room for growth, they're the only businesses you want to be in. So how do you pick them when you're making an acquisition? What happens? Are you walking down the road and you see one and you think, oh, that's interesting, I'll go in and have a look? How did you end up buying a Barber's? Was it a chain of 9 when you bought it?
No,
or were there fewer?
No, we started off with 1.
That's right.
So because I'd seen a load of barbers were opening up, especially in supermarkets. And quite similar to us, high margin, very dependent on the individual. Can't do it on the internet. Exactly. So I thought, well, it can't be that difficult. So let's have a go. And we knew someone who was a barber who's really good. And we knew our supermarket pods could work. So we went to a thing called the Barber Bash, which is like a trade show for barbers. And that sort of put me off a bit, actually, because they were all about, it was quite fashionable and cool and stuff. Yeah. And if you're sitting in a supermarket car park, it's not cool.
No.
So I said, let's just do 3. I think we did 3. And then we made a load of mistakes. We had one that was going really well, still our busiest shop, and it went on from there, really. So we're opening another one, so we'll get up to 10. It's never going to be 500 shops, but it's a nice business.
So you're looking for things that fit with the things that you already do.
Yeah, and we can plug it into our head office function.
Yeah.
So we don't need to replicate the overhead.
And you're never off duty then, in that sense, are you? If you found yourself, I don't know, on holiday and saw in Florida someone doing something that nobody's doing here, you'd immediately be thinking, that's very interesting.
I think if you ask my wife, she'd say I'm not always present.
No, that's one way of putting it. But it has its benefits. It has its upsides. So here's a question I have no idea. We're nearly done. I have no idea how you will answer this question. What ambitions do you have left?
I've got loads of things. I'm ambitious for our kids.
That doesn't count.
I'm ambitious for prison reform.
Yes, I'm not sure that counts either. What about what are you ambitious for, James Timpson?
Lots of things I've sort of done. That's
what I mean.
I don't have any physical ambitions. I sort of, I've done a marathon and that sort of stuff, which I couldn't do again. My knees are knackered. I need to think about that. I'd quite like to have a go at another type of business.
Okay.
Within our business,
yes.
And maybe find another trade that we could have a go at, because we can still, we're still opening 2 Timpson shops a week, and we're opening up photo shops and our barber shop, and we've got our hospitality business. We're spending a fortune refurbing a whole hotel in France, but I think I wouldn't mind the challenge of having a go at another trade.
I get that. And finally, a boring question: how much time do you spend wondering about the future of the high street? It's not boring to me, by the way, but I'm just thinking, because I must be the only phone-in host in history who routinely does phone-ins about the high street and retail and the future of it. But Because I understand why your businesses thrive, and to oversimplify enormously, it's because you're doing things that can only be done face to face.
Yeah.
But that's not true of the massive majority of what was on the high street when we were growing up.
The high streets that I see are a massive variety of some where we can't even open up a shop because there's no vacancies and everyone's there and it's thriving and it's busy.
Okay, yes.
And other places where it's terrible and everyone's just given up. They might as well just close up. So the future of the high street I'm quite confident about, but you can't see them as shops, just see them as buildings. And actually it needs long-term brave decisions with the councils, really. So if you go to let me think, Slough and Maidenhead, they're changing the town centres dramatically by basically reducing the number of shops and instead putting in cinemas and libraries and senior living and that kind of thing. Whereas others, it needs serious investment, but not to make more shops, but to make them into something else. The big problem is retail parks. I mean, we're in a lot of retail parks, so we're sort of partly to blame.
Yes.
But if you go to Germany, where they don't have many retail parks, the town centres are thriving.
I know the answer to this final question, I think. You've never, because the way you speak about public policy is obviously quite inspirational and very passionate. You never had any temptation to move into your brother's line of work and actually go down the political route? No,
I'd be hopeless at that. I'm always happy to help, and I do quite a lot of stuff with the justice teams and things. I set up all the employment advisory boards, and I think I can be more effective using my business skills to try and fix some of their sort of internal internal things than doing no, not for me.
Good. James Timpson, thank you.
Thank you very much.